tonight I wanted to look briefly at the life of the sixth Imam and some of the teachings that the Imam has given to us. And more specifically tonight, I want to look at the topic of the advice or guidance that the sixth Imam gave to the youth of our community. Right? And obviously this is very pertinent not only for here, but for any community in the world that we go to. Right? Whenever we go to any of the centers, and whenever I've traveled from coast to coast in Canada or Europe or Africa or Australia, one of the hottest topics on the minds of everybody is, where are the youth in our communities? Where are they in the majalis? Where are they in the centers? Where are they when it comes to volunteering their time? Giving not only in terms of cooking and cleaning and preparing food, but where are the intellectuals of our community? The ones who are experts in IT, who are professionals in videography, who are artists, who are graphic designers, who are maybe people in the media who can bring our community forward. The question is always there, is where are the youth? And so I want to try and answer some of the points from our sixth Imam, the guidance that he has given about how we meaning the community in general, should be interacting with the youth, but also what is it that the youth also have to give back. Before I begin with that though, let me just go to the next slide and talk very briefly about our sixth Imam. I'm sure we know all of these facts, but sometimes a reminder is good for all of us. So as I said, he was born on the same day as our Prophet, on the same 17th of Rabiul Awwal, in the year 80 after the Hijrah in the city of Medina. He attained the position of Imamate obviously with the death of his father Muhammad al-Baqir, peace be upon him. And the sixth Imam was about 34 years old when his Imamate initiated. And as you see that he had the longest Imamate out of any of the Imams, other than obviously the 12th Imam, at 28 years. And it's important to realize that the sixth Imam lived at a very unique position in Islamic history. Because the Bani Umayyah, the Umayyad dynasty who had been ruling from about the year 40 up until 129, that they obviously had the control of the Muslim Ummah. They were expansionists. They launched wars to take over territory. And eventually their rule was coming to an end, and the Banu Abbas would take over that domination. But in the process of the Banu Umayyah losing control and Banu Abbas coming on the scene, there basically was a power vacuum in the community. There was a power vacuum in the Muslim Ummah. And what this meant for the sixth Imam, the fifth Imam, from our perspective and also the general Muslim theologians and scholars, was because these two dynasties were fighting for power, they didn't have time to focus on oppressing the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. They didn't have time to focus on even the Muslim community on a whole. They were worried more about trying to preserve their own power structure that they had. And so when you look at history and you read the lives of these Imams, the fifth and sixth in specific, you see how they began to openly teach in the Masjid of the Prophet in Medina. Not only hundreds, but we're told that thousands of scholars and students were in the masjid learning the various disciplines. Not just hadith, although as you know if you study history that hadith, writing of hadith was haram, it was prohibited. The second Khalifa, he came on the scene and he actually prevented the Muslims from writing down the hadith of Rasulullah. And all of the Muslim books mention this, not our books. The mainstream Muslims, you look at their books of history and hadith, and the second Khalifa has clearly said that he would actually punish the people violently who would dare narrate and say, Qala Rasulullah. And we have hadith that even Abu Huraira, whose name I'm sure we've heard, that he complained that he was being stifled, that he could not say that the Prophet of Allah has said this and that. And so this era was drawing to a close. The Bani Abbas are coming on the scene, and now because of that, the scholarship begins to bloom. Scholars begin to debate, to discuss, to bring those hadith that had been written but hidden into the limelight. And so this became a golden opportunity for the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and obviously the rest of the Muslims to begin to further expound on knowledge which up until that point had been the spreading of that had been stifled, had been constricted within the community. Before I go to the main theme, I want to bring up this topic on the next slide of our identity. And the reason I bring this up is that we live in an era where many people are being told, when you ask who they are or who you are, they'll say, well, you're Muslim. And people don't want to hear that you're Shia, you're Sunni, you're this, you're that. And many times, even myself growing up, people would say, brother, don't say that you're Shia or you're this, you're that. Just say you're Muslim, because Allah never uses the word Shia in the Quran or Sunnah, which is obviously a false statement, because Allah uses the word Shia in the Quran in a positive light. But people say the Prophet didn't believe in Shia, Sunni, we're all equal, why do we use these names? And we have to realize that, yes, we as Muslims, that is our primary identity. We are ones who submit to Allah. No doubt about it, right? This is a Quranic narrative as well. The Quran tells us that you have been called Muslims, that you are Muslims, you have submitted to God, to Allah, this is your identity. But then we say, well, no, we have to identify ourselves because Allah has done that in the Quran. You look in the Quran when Allah talks about the prophets, about Ibrahim alayhi salam, Allah says that he was a Shia of Prophet Nuh. And Allah uses the word Shia, and He says that Nabi Nuh, or Nabi Ibrahim rather, was a Shia, was a follower of Prophet Noah. But even if you go further, you look at the Hadith, and the Muslims of all persuasions mention that, for example, when Surah Al-Bayyinah came to Rasulullah, and Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ, that Rasulullah went to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he says, Ya Ali, anta wa shiyatuka, that these, you and your Shia, these are khairul bariyah, that your followers are the best of creation on earth. And this is in the non-Shia books of Hadith. You can look this up. For example, in the book Shawahid al-Tanzil by al-Haskani, a very famous Sunni scholar, compiles a 2-volume work in Arabic where he takes every verse of the Quran which speaks about the merit of the Ahlul Bayt, and he quotes Hadith to prove ayat of the Quran about the Prophet's statements about Ali, about Fatima and Hassan and Hussein alayhimus salam. So we say we're a Shia, not that we don't follow Rasulullah, we follow the Sunnah of Rasulullah, but we do it through a particular chain, through a particular individual or individuals, because we believe that they have preserved the Sunnah of Rasulullah in the best way possible. But then the challenge comes because you have Zaydis, you have Ismailis, you have all of these other Shias out there in the world today. And so we go a step further and say, well, we're Ithna Asharis. We follow 12 Imams. Beginning obviously with Amir al-Mu'mineen and culminating with Imam al-Hujjah, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. But the question comes is, why do we then call ourselves Jafari Shias? Right? You look at a lot of our religious centers, the Jafari Community Center, the Jafari Mosque. Why don't we, for example, call ourselves Alawi Shias? Obviously that has a negative connotation in the politics of the world today. But really we're Alawis, we follow Amir al-Mu'mineen. But then we're Hassanis, we're Hussainis, we're Sajjadis, we're Baqiris, we're Qadimis, we're Radawis, we are Mahdawis. But we are some reason attributed to Imam Jafar al-Sadiq. We're called Jafari Shia. Why? Right? It's something that we should realize, because people might ask us, you're Shia, what's your proof of being Shia from the Quran? We can quote verses of the Quran. They'll say you follow 12 Imams. Why do you follow 12? Why not the 4 Khulafa? We should be able to bring hadith from the books of the non-Shia to say, look, Rasulullah said after him would be 12 Khulafa, 12 Amirs from Banu Hashim, from Quraysh. The Prophet himself said, follow the 12. And then people might say, well, you follow or you call Jafari, prove the truthfulness of why you're called Ja'faris. I don't want to go into the entire discussion, but just to give us one identifier. Although we follow Amir al-Mu'mineen, we follow Imam Hassan, we follow Imam Hussein, we accept all of their teachings, we don't doubt any of them. And as I've said before, they're all from one nur, one light. They all give us the same teachings. The way that Amir al-Mu'mineen prayed Salat is the exact same way that the 6th Imam prayed. You can't say they prayed differently. In fact, in the non-Shia, in the Sunni books of Hadith, they tell us that when Amir al-Mu'mineen took over the Khilafat, 20 some odd years after having been denied the right, and he led the Jamaat prayers, the companions of Rasulullah are quoted as saying that when they prayed behind Amir al-Mu'mineen, they say that we have never prayed a salat like this since the time of Rasulullah. So what happened that people couldn't even know how to pray like the Prophet prayed until Amir al-Mu'mineen comes and leads the community. So we're Alawis, we love Amir al-Mu'mineen. We would give our lives, our parents' lives, our children's lives for Amir al-Mu'mineen. But when we say we're Jafari, we are saying that he had an opportunity in Medina to teach the religious sciences, to elaborate on the fiqh of why we perform certain actions. He was able to develop a school in which theology, aqaid, could be discussed and debated. He discussed philosophy. He brought up tafsir of the Quran. Much of what we have today in our identity as Ja'fari Shias is because of the fact of that political conflict between Banu Abbas and Banu Umayyah that gave the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, the 5th and the 6th Imam, that opportunity to speak in public, to teach, to enter into debate, to dialogue with the people. And so we really owe it to the 6th Imam that he gave us he had that opportunity, and he gave us the ability to attribute ourselves to him. Again, otherwise we are followers of all of the Imams. We don't differentiate, but he had the most opportune time to be able to elucidate on the religion and really bring forth the hadith that were hidden, the teachings that could not be spoken about in public because of fear of repercussion by the khulafa of the time. And so really when we celebrate the 6th Imam's birth, we celebrate the fact that our identity goes back to him through the fact of his being the intellectual mastermind behind bringing forth all of these teachings. On the next slide, I have just a word which is highlighted, assessment, and you see a lot of other words around it. And what I want to get at in this slide and this introduction is the fact that, and again the topic is the words of the 6th Imam in guiding the youth, is the fact that one of the principal factors that we as a community, whether it's here or anywhere that we go, the one thing that we always need to do is plan for our future. They have a saying in English, if you fail to plan, then you have planned to fail. It's very simple. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Whether it's at school and you don't study or do your homework, whether you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, whether you're a mother working at home and you don't plan, every aspect of our life needs planning. Right? Even you look at the last will, the wasiyah that Amir al-Mu'mineen leaves for his family, he advises them to have taqwa of Allah, and then he says, after the taqwa of Allah, وَنَظْمِ أَمْرِكُمْ, have order, have discipline in your affairs. Make sure things are set out as they should be. One of the challenges as a Muslim community globally that we face, and there are exceptions to this rule, no doubt, but for the most part, we don't seem to plan for the future. We don't seem to do a forecast, plan, an analysis to see where we are today and plan for where we want to be 5, 10, 20 years in the future. This is something that the non-Muslims do on a regular basis. And if you work in the corporate sector, you would see this. I know when I worked in corporate Canada, right, they weren't just looking for the next product to release tomorrow. They're saying, well, what is our 3-year, 5-year roadmap? Where do we want our company to be? In fact, I was watching a documentary with a very famous Hollywood producer, James Cameron, who made the movie Avatar. Maybe some of you have seen it, and the Titanic, and many other movies. But when he talked about his making of the movie Avatar, which, if you don't know, it was the highest grossing movie ever. It made over $3 billion. $3 billion this movie made. So it's a huge movie. But I was watching an interview with him, and he said that he wrote the script of the movie, and he knew for a fact that technology was not at the level to make the movie. Computers were not powerful enough in the late 90s. The cameras he wanted were not even created yet. The CGI animation software wasn't even developed. This was not even a thought in the mind of software and hardware creators. But he said to himself, I'm going to write the movie, the script. I'm going to prepare the entire script of this movie so that in 10 years, when the technology is ready, when computers are up to date, when the software is available, when the cameras have been made, I can go and make this movie. So imagine, here's a man who I would say is in a state of intidhar. Not intidhar of the Imam of his time, but intidhar for technology, waiting for technology to get to a level where he could do what his responsibility was to make a movie. And imagine he planned for 10, 15 years in the future when technology would catch up. To me, that is a very brilliant man. If he was Muslim, it would be amazing. But it gives us the thought that, are we planning for our Imam's return? Are we planning 10 years, 20 years, 50 years if the Imam comes in that time frame, that we would be ready, that our communities would be ready, that our children would be ready, that our institutions are ready to help the Imam? We see that everybody else is becoming ready for whatever it is they're waiting for. But we have to look at ourselves and see, are we ready for what we are expecting? And so let me begin on the next slide with the very first hadith from our sixth Imam, in which he gives us an indication of us having to be parents, teachers, educators, elders, leaders, whatever we are, to begin the first move. And as the slide says, that, and this is from the sixth Imam, where he says, initiate the process of teaching your young ones about religion before the deviants get to them. Now he uses the word al-Murji'ah. They were a deviant sect at the time of the sixth Imam. They had a certain twisted concept of, for example, free will and predestination, and they had a lot of other confused beliefs. So the Imam used them as the example, the Murji'ah. They're a sect that doesn't exist anymore within the world of Islam. But he wanted to get a point across that before our children become corrupt by the society that they live in, by movies, by music, by the secular school system, by whatever can corrupt us, he says, get into the process of teaching your children about the religion. Right? And this is what I say is the first move that we have to make, is we have to ensure that we are doing everything that we can do to ensure that our children do not get snagged by the vices that are out there. And we all know that the world that we live in today, and God knows what will come in the future in 5, 10, 20 years, that today we hold evil, or we hold the potential to commit evil in the palm of our hand. Everybody in this room probably has a smartphone or a tablet. And if our children, for example, when they go to school and they're given unlimited access to the internet, no filters. I don't know about here in this province, but I know in Ontario, there was a fight because the parents wanted the schools to put filters on the internet in the schools. And they were told, no, we don't want to stifle freedom of speech and the ability for our students to explore the world. And so they don't put filters, at least in that province, on the internet in the school system. And we give our children the technology, or they go to a public school, and the world is open for them to do what they want, to look at what they want, to listen to whatever they want on the internet. And as the Imam says, that work and initiate the process of teaching the children before the forces around us get to them and corrupt them. So going on the next slide, what we have to focus on are our priorities. And our priorities, as I gave the example of the film producer, they have to be very pinpoint and focused. We have to sit down as a community, as elders, as youth, as parents, as soon-to-be parents, and try to figure out where we're at, where we want to be at in, again, 5 years, short-term goal, 3 years, 5 years, then go long-term, 10 years, 15 years, and began to chart out a progress of where we want to be. Again, we're not guaranteed to get to that level, But you know, in Islam, we're never told that we are responsible for our outcomes. What I mean by that is we're told to plan, to fulfill our responsibilities, and leave it to Allah to actually either allow us to be successful or to have a slip and we don't make it to where we want to go. We have to do the plan. It's up to us to plan our future, to begin the process of doing the work. And then we have the trust in Allah, the tawakkul on Allah. If everything is done right, we fulfill all of our obligations, and we trust in Allah, then we believe deep down that Allah will allow whatever we want to do to come to fruition. So we have to plan, we have to think, we have to organize, we have to strategize, and then we leave it to Allah to help us get to that outcome. But the importance is prioritization. Right? I remember going to a community many years ago in another part of the world, and I was speaking to the president of that community, an elected community member, an older senior person in that community. And he comes to me and he says, "MashaAllah, none of our community members, boys or girls, are doing drugs or alcohol." And I said, "Wow, that's amazing." I didn't say to him, I thought to myself, how do you know every single child in your community, in your city? And it was a major city in the world where there's probably thousands in his community. I didn't argue with him because you don't want to obviously start a debate, but I thought to myself, either this man is truthful, he knows everybody in his community, or this is what I think is he was very naive. He thought, maybe with blinders on his eyes, that the whole community is good. And we have to be realistic, right? We can't live with our head in the sand and think that everything is perfect out there. You know, we look at our communities and we're all struggling. But when you look in the newspapers in major Canadian cities and you have a headline of a Muslim who's charged with murdering his girlfriend, and not just a Muslim, but somebody from our Shia community who's charged with murdering his girlfriend and he's in jail. Or you have youth in our community who I know personally who are in jail for attempted murder. We know that we have challenges in our community, right? We have difficulties and we don't run away and hide from them. No, we have to address them. We have to recognize there are problems, but we have to then recognize that there have to be solutions that come to address these problems in our society, right? We can't live here and think that it's not going to happen. We look at the society around us. There are prisons in every province in Canada full of people, right? Whether they're religious or not, that's irrelevant. But I'm sure their parents or their community never expected them to go in that lifestyle. And we have to realize that we are no different. Being a Muslim doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're an angel. Muslims still commit sins. Muslims still are in prison for crimes they have committed or that they are charged with committing. But we have to realize there is a problem and then try and prioritize our life and come up and devise solutions community-wide to address those problems. And so let me go to the second part of my program for tonight on the next slide, which is when Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam was in discussion with a companion named Abu Jafar al-Ahwal. He came to Medina from Basra, which is like 1,500 kilometers away. Right? And that's one of the beauties that the companions, wherever the Imams were, even if they're thousands of kilometers away, they would still try and go and meet the Imam. They would still make an attempt to go and meet their leader. So Abu Jafar comes to the sixth Imam and he's sitting with him, talking to him, asking whatever general chit-chat or questions that these two people would be having. And then the sixth Imam asks Abu Jafar one question. He says that, what's the condition of my Shia in Basra? What are they up to? How are they? Are they in problem? Are they in difficulties? Tell me, give me a synopsis of what the Shias are about. And then on the next slide, the companion, Abu Jafar, gives the sixth Imam a response. On the next slide, the sixth Imam is told, he says that, I swear to God, again Abu Jafar is telling the sixth Imam, I swear to God that the people who are the Shias He says they're qaleel, there are very few of them, very small number of Shia. And he says, and those who struggle to be your followers, to follow this path, they're also very few in number. So he's admitting to the Imam, right? And unfortunately in our society in Canada, in the West, we have a concept of what we call yes men. Right? A yes man is somebody who will say whatever the boss wants to hear. Right? Your manager at work wants to hear that numbers are good, that sales are up. And even if you have to lie about it, you'll do it because you want to be in the good books of the manager. And so sometimes you have yes men in a society where they will just say what people want to hear. But this companion, he told the Imam how it is. He didn't sugarcoat it or mince his words or try and glamorize the situation of Basra. He says, no, the Shias are very few. There's very few people who are your Shia. And those who are even trying to be Shia, they're even fewer than that. So what does the Imam say? Give up on everybody? Move to Medina? What would the Imam say? What's he going to do? He can't just snap his fingers and change everybody to become Shia, because Islam isn't like that, right? Islam is about committing, but committing through our own heart because we want to be, because we find benefit in Islam, not because I have to do it. And so the Imam in the next slide, he says to this companion, Abu Jafar, he says, Alayka bil ahdath. I advise you to work on the youth. Why the youth? He says, because they are quick to accept and follow goodness. Right? You look at the youth today, right? And when they want to put their mind to something, they excel. Kids learn how to play sports from a young age. You put them on skates and within a few hours they're out there skating because they have that passion, they have that drive, they have the youth, that period, we can pick up things very quick, right? Children play video games. They love all these video games. You give them the controller, you teach them, okay, this does that, this button does this. In 5 minutes they can run circles around you playing a video game, right? The Imam is showing us if you want to really change a society, don't look at the senior citizens, look at the 80-year-olds. They're important, no doubt. We have to give respect to our elders. We have to give them prominence. We have to give them an opportunity also. But he says if you want to change a society, look at the youth. They're the quickest to change. When you give them change, they'll accept it. When you give them something good, they'll take it and run with it. And we see this in the secular world. We just have to take that same example of sports personalities or whatever the kids like to get engaged in and try and change that to get them focused back onto the religion. Make Islam relevant for their lives. Make it fun to be in the religion. Make it fun to come to the centers. Make it attractive to want to engage in religious activity. And I'll end with this on the next couple of slides. On the next slide is that it's not just about the elders. It's not just about the community, the physical building, the scholars, the parents, the leaders, the teachers in the Sunday school. These are all pieces of the puzzle, right? Just like a jigsaw puzzle, if you have a jigsaw puzzle at home, 200-piece puzzle, you have to have all of those pieces in the right spot to get the complete picture. If you're missing one piece, you could do the whole jigsaw puzzle, glue it to a board, but you're missing that one piece, and your friend will come over and say, this puzzle isn't done. You've still got one block missing. Or you got a Lego, you got building a tower out of Lego. If you're missing a main block, it's not complete. And so the youth and what we expect from them, it is a jigsaw puzzle. All of us are a part of that puzzle. The parents have to be there. Parents cannot use the madrasa as a daycare system, that they drop the kids off at 10, they come at 2, and that they don't engage with their children at home. We can't have parents not engaging their children on a regular basis. But the children, the young boys and girls, they are also a part of the solution. As we say in English, if you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. And so the young boys and girls also have a responsibility. And in the next slide, I'll conclude with a hadith from our sixth Imam, in which he gives us the antidote. The sixth Imam says, I don't like to see any youth from amongst you, the Shia, Imagine, this is the sixth Imam talking to us. I don't like to see any youth from amongst you, my Shias, except that you're in one of two states. Either you are an alim, a scholar, or muta'allim. You are a student. You are seeking knowledge, religious knowledge. So we have one of two options. If you're a young boy or a girl, either you're an alim, a scholar of Islam, and if you're not a scholar, then you need to be a student on the path of knowledge. But then the Imam gives us an outcome, and I'll end with this on the next slide. What happens if you're neither a scholar or a student? Is there a middle ground? He says, if your youth is neither a scholar or a student, then they have deserted their period of their youth. They've abandoned their youth period. So you might still be 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, but if you're not on the road of knowledge, he says you've deserted the path of the youth. And he says if you've deserted the path of being a youth, then you have wasted away your youthful days. Again, you could be in the age bracket of a youth, but if you're not seeking knowledge, you're wasting your youth. You're sitting there playing Fortnite 8 hours a day. You're playing video games. You're doing things which I'm not going to say are irrelevant, but they don't deserve all of your focus. Play video games half an hour a day. When you come home, read your Quran, pray your prayers, do your homework, help your parents at home, and then play maybe an hour. Read some Quran after prayers. Balance your life. Have fun. Go and play outside in the summer, in the winter. Play games. Go to the park. Go swimming. Do all of these things. But realize that you also have to be getting knowledge of Islam. He says if you've wasted your youth, the next level, he says you've committed an act of transgression. You have been doing the act of dhulm. You've been unfair. Not to Allah, but you're being unfair to your own soul. Just like in Dua Kumail we just read, ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي, right? وَتَجَرَّأْتُ بِجَهْلِي. When we don't go down the path of knowledge, we are doing injustice to ourselves. It's not going to hurt Allah. It's going to affect you and I on the end. And I'll end with this. The sixth Imam says, if you've done injustice, if you've committed transgressions, he says your outcome is the fire of hell. Simple as that. So you could be praying and fasting and doing good actions, but the Ahlul Bayt expect us to be on the path of knowledge, to be on the path of Islam, to be those who know this religion. And I'll end with this point, is that knowing about Islam makes our lives easier. I might have said this in the past. Let me repeat the point. That learning about Islam, learning the wajibat, learning the muharramat, learning the obligations and prohibitions, learning the religion makes our life easier. It might limit, Islam does limit us, no doubt. We don't drink, we don't go to parties, we don't, do all of those things maybe our non-Muslim friends might or might not be doing. So we do have limits in religion, limits as human beings, based on our intellect and what tells us what is good and bad. But limits in life are good, limits have to be there. And Islam does limit us, but when you learn about the religion, you learn about how much freedom we have, how much openness there is in religion. And if we get to that level where we can learn about Islam and we can begin to appreciate the teachings, we'll see that the limitations that we have actually end up melting away. Because there's much more freedom in Islam than there are limitations. 2 or 3 things are haram to eat, but the vast majority is halal. Right? Allah says, eat from the earth, halalan tayyiban. It's just blood and pork and a few animals that are haram. Everything else is allowed. Just a few things which are haram to drink. Everything else is allowed. A few things which are haram to look at. Everything else is allowed. Right? So when we learn about the religion, then we will learn that it is so much more that we can enjoy and have fun in. And I'll conclude with this, is that we as a community, collective, the elders, the leaders, the parents, all of us, the youth themselves, all of us have to put in an effort. We all have to do our fair share to keep our youth on the straight path. So the youth have their responsibility, but the leaders of the communities, we also have responsibilities to ensure that we give the environment, the room, the space to the next generation. Because as the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have told us, and I'll end with this, they say that today you are the youth of the community, but tomorrow you will be the leaders of the society. And if we expect our young women and the young men of our community who are here tonight to become the leaders of this community or wherever community they move to, they have to be equipped with the knowledge of Islam today and be able to know what is right from wrong and to implement what it is that they know.